So, yeah, up here in Washington State in Yakima County, and taking land that we can that isn't so expensive. I mean, if we step away from Walmart and the paved roads, we can get out into land that we can afford. And permaculture solves life's problems, through local gardens and the reuse of the resources that we have available to us. These are ways that we learn from nature and we can implement it into our lives instead of what has been advertised to us as normal, right? Because normal can be manipulated. The natural is a natural expression. It's as it should be, and we're human beings, and we can be trained to step away from what is natural to align with what is normal. It's much harder to do that with animals. So my role here at the apocalyptic Oshkosh Haven here in Central Washington is to help Shonda and her global network of helping people to realize how we can grow some food and resources instead of just grass that we throw away. And I mean, it's not that we shouldn't ever grow grass because it's a good ground cover too, but it takes a lot of water and it takes a lot of maintenance to have it look the way we've been advertised. When we when we recognize options that are present in nature and how nature works naturally, locally, we start to really gain some benefits in what we do in our lives and how we experience our life. So, like I said, my project here is twofold. It's to educate people on permaculture so that we can reduce fire, flood, erosion, drought, famine, and when we are creating landscapes that can support life, we can eliminate homelessness too. And when people are living a life aligned with what is natural, they choose not to escape it. The fentanyl epidemic, and we have a housing epidemic, and we have people on the streets, and we have people who can barely afford food. And is either our food from the grocery store or a feed that came from, and it ripened in root, in the way it got there, because it was picked before it was ready, so that way it's not rotten by the time you get it? Or do we gather our food from the source for free, where it ripened at the root? Its connection to the earth, its connection to everything that is natural, or is normal in nature, right? The other aspect is that because we are a human being and we are capable of so many different things and expressions, we have to manage our mind and our bodies in a way that it benefits us. And so for this, I teach people, or I reintroduce them to the ideas of meditation. Because as a child, we were breathing into our belly. I think we were doing that naturally until stresses and traumas have brought it up into upper respiratory breathing, rapid breathing, right? Like an animal when it's in distress or stress. In stress of our landscapes, because we haven't shaped them how we are the tenants of this earth. We are the caretakers. We are the trustees. And our role here is to facilitate, to learn from nature how it works and help it along. There's a lot of places where the beaver, he's trying to hold water to land and he's trying to spread it out. He's allowing it to soak in. And everywhere that she provides a pond, life thrives. And so if we can recognize these principles and how to hold the water of the land, spread it out, let it soak in. We start to create green belts. And we can do that through terracing and reverse cut terracing so that we can also manage the air current that works every day, right? So every evening when you've got air moving down a mountain as it cools, if you've got pockets, I wish I had a little marker that I could draw on this, but I don't. So you have to check out Andrew Millison's work.
Right.
He does fantastic illustrations. But anyway, basically we have air coming down the hill. If we can create pits that it drops into and the coldest air stays on that across the hillside, well, the coldest air is staying up high. And then when the warm air is coming up the valley, it's going to mix with that cold air. We're going to create dew point zones or condensation pockets, and so we're able to pull humidity out of the air. So even in desert environments, where like here in Central Washington, I get an average of 8 inches of annual precipitation, which isn't a lot. I mean, it definitely classifies as desert, and because we get these rains um, in frequency, but in deluge. I mean, it really, really rains, and so when the snow is melting off in the spring, we get a little creek flowing by here. And 20 years ago, I moved here, and the first time I heard the waterfall, and the first time I saw the creek, I just thought it was just amazing. I thought it was a beautiful thing. But then I realized, I'm like, all that water is helping to contribute to flooding in low-lying areas, right? And so I started creating catch basins, and I started spreading that water out a little bit. And it would only take about 5 or 6 days for the water to completely soak in where it is spread out to. But at least now it's being caught to the land and soaking in and charging up aquifer, and it's reducing erosion because it's not moving so fast, and we're reducing fire because we're getting things to grow, and we're getting root networks to establish themselves that tie soil together and also work as a big sponge. When you have a spongy, like a wet sponge, um, earth landscape, when the water falls on it, it quickly absorbs into it. And that's what a forest does. Another thing a forest does, different than from agriculture, what we're currently been supporting in the masses, in agriculture is localized, or it's centralized to the areas that are vast enough, open enough to be able to run huge tractors and accomplish what we're doing, right? And and we've had to do that because we haven't known better. But when we're producing food forests and we're producing these everywhere, we're localizing the resources available to us. And a forest is planted in diversity. So it's not necessarily rows of one thing and rows of another to make them easy to catalog and harvest and efficiently and things like that. But what it does do is it promotes the predators to the pests to coexist in the same space. And so then there's a natural symbiotic balance maintained by nature, right? So we mimic nature. And the $5 word, if you've gotten the education from a building, is called biomimicry. But we're just copying what we can perceive in nature. And this is where um, permaculture does that for the landscape and the resource management and things like this. Whereas yoga and meditation, same thing. The original yogis went to nature. They got away from the culture being shaped by idols and maybe even television programming. And they learned what it was to be natural again. And so then they copied the poses of nature. And they explored the movements of nature and the peace and the calm. And our abilities to do that and bring that into the right now moment. So one of the things I teach here is that is heavily meditated. I don't know if that's pretty backwards or whatever, but Anyway, heavily meditated is just realizing the power of right now. And when we recognize the power of right now, how do we want to be in our life? And how do we want to change our environment so that it suits us? And something that we can hand down to our grandchildren and to inspire others. Because there's a lot of stress and struggle out in the world. There's a lot of people that they're struggling in life when we don't need to be. There's another way, right? And permaculture is that way, and it is a force that's helping to unite people from all over the world right now. I mean, we are engaged in a conversation that we couldn't have had 20 years ago, right? And I call this the apocalyptic ashram Fox Haven, because this is an experience of polarities. I'm using resources that are available in our communities for free, tires and pallets and cardboard and the food scraps from the grocery store and people's household things that they see as trash, but if we reutilize them in creative ways, they become treasure. And if we can turn something that is viewed as trash into treasure, that's alchemy. That's transformation. That's creation. It's not just consumption of what something's been offered to us, but we're creating the future we want to experience with our actions right now. One of the ways I introduce this to bring it together is called play yoga, and it's pixelated landscape and yoga. And what we do is we look at a spot and we imagine what that spot has been through. We imagine what it could look like and how it could better serve. And then we transform it. And we just pick out one spot because that's what we can have control over. But we pick out one spot. And maybe that spot's 4 feet in diameter, or maybe that spot's 40 feet in diameter. Just depends on the motivation of the individual. But in that 4 feet diameter, if you were to dig it down, just even 1 foot, right? And you were to divert water, digging like a little trench to each side of it, diverting any area of water into that hole. Just by digging a hole, you've now created a catch zone, and weeds and plants and everything else is going to grow a little bit better down inside that hole out in the desert than it will if it's exposed to everything, right? And that's what we need to do is, we protect what we want to create. We build the conditions so it can thrive. And then we step back and it takes care of itself. Because we built the sustainability, we built it with intelligent design, we've recognized how nature is working naturally. And from that point, we step out of stress and struggle and we step into health because everybody's eating healthy food instead of fast food. We step into happiness because when you don't have to be working a job every day, doing things that you don't want to do just to pay somebody else on every level to exist, you have time to do the things that you want to do. And if that doesn't make you happy, then you should change the things that you do. And it creates peace because there's an abundance that we don't need to steal from somebody else or have a government steal from somebody else to provide for those who can't provide for themselves. And if we didn't have an entity willing to steal your property that you've created when you harmed no one, we would have shelter for everyone everywhere. Because there's resources like glass bottles and bricks and rocks. The Flintstones showed us that we shouldn't have houses built out of sticks that burn easily and rot away. Because I doubt if they handed off their home to Pebbles with a mortgage, right? I know they're fictional characters, but the reality is true. People still build houses out of rocks, and they last a long time. They call them castles. They stood for thousands of years so far. It's almost like they're mocking us. We show cartoons. They have like three little pigs, right? But yet we still build houses out of twigs. Permaculture is what makes sense. Permaculture is how we build a re-love solution. We don't have to change things by initiating violence against somebody somewhere else because that's what they've done to us in the past. We change the future by changing our right now moment. Just start supporting things that truly make sense, things that matter. We have a tremendous amount of energy going towards everything that doesn't matter. When if 8 billion people on the planet were to each give an hour a day or more to things that matter, just within a week or so, I think we would solve most of the problems that we face. And then we can go back to the things that don't matter. That's fine. But we need to stay focused because we are like a ship. We are a giant ship called humanity. And when we're in a direction that we desire, we keep pushing, right? But we have to recognize that if we get off of target, off of where we desire to be, which everybody I talk with, health, happiness, peace, and abundance is a pretty good foundation for creating a family and a future. So, and I can't see my clock, so I don't know if I'm how much longer I have here. But
you got about 15 minutes. Go ahead.
Okay, great. So some of the things that I've been introducing here on at the Apocalyptic Ashram House Haven with permaculture is Google culture. And so we have giant berms that have been piled with organic debris, logs, branches, leaves, pallets, cardboard, food scraps, chipped up yard waste. I had dirt and rocks and everything else gets piled onto these berms. And these berms, they serve many functions. There's a giant one at the front edge of the property that serves as just a visual barricade from what's going on up here. And people that drive by, they don't really see too much of what's happening here. But when people come up and visit, they say, oh my gosh, I didn't even know this existed. Because the way we can shape our landscapes can be a polarity of what you're used to experiencing. And so this area has some very closed-minded folks that are in positions of political influence. And so I have to be a little bit conservative with what I'm doing. But I've had the ecology department here, and they've inspected the place. And well, I guess we did a little bit of a tour. And I've had Department of Transportation and Environmental Services, a representative, he come and tour the property. And both of them were like, oh my God, this is fantastic. This would have cost the government millions to accomplish, and it should be implemented everywhere. Because by shifting the landscapes with these hugelkultur, especially, when we have a hillside and then we cut in a terrace, at the outside edge of that terrace, if we then dig a trench, right? And we dig a trench down at 4 to 5 feet. This is what I've done all the way down through the property. We've got about a 10% grade. And so then in that trench is where we start piling all this debris. And that's going to allow any water that's on that terrace that gets caught in the wintertime or in the spring when we get the water, that will allow that to soak in and charge up that hugelkultur mound. So the first few years of a hugelkultur mound, you're not going to see as many benefits as you will 5 years into it or 8 years into it, and they last for a good 20 to 25 years depending on how much hydration they get and how much water is being pulled off of them. But we're micro releasing the nutrients of the material in that trench to the plants that are surrounding it, and what we've created is like an underground water battery. And so the idea is that this water can soak into this organic material that is holding back, works as like a little dam across the hillside. But we also have to make sure that we've designed in keyway exit points. We have to have it to where we don't have a breach of it, and then it would wipe out a lot of things, you know. So we do have to use intelligent design and just managing that water so it works for it, but not against it. We're not trying to hold back everything. We're just trying to spread it out and give it time to soak in. So in these terraces, there's an abundance of cardboard in the community that I live in, and so I don't know how many tons. We're talking 100 or 200 tons at least. I've taken cardboard, and luckily the people that bring it, they flatten it out for me already. And then I lay it on the unimproved soil that has been just shaped, right? And so we've got reverse cut terrace, so we're going to be able to hold in a bunch of water. We first lay down a bunch of cardboard. You know, we're talking the cardboard's already flattened and typically doubled, and then 2 to 3 of those on top of each other, interlocking and just covering up everything. And then we bring in trucks full of wood chips or the chipped up yard waste, which is my preference. It's free and it contains more biodiversity. It's the grass clippings, it's the everything. All the branches that are being brought to the landfill get chipped up. They send them into a huge pile, and I've got videos of that on my YouTube channel. I'll share a link of that when I complete the my portion here. But the Free Will, it's called Free Will, the YouTube channel. And if you type in #Mad Monk, MADDMONK underscore AAH for the apocalyptic offspring standard, the YouTube channel will come up and it'll share a lot of these projects that I'm working on and how using permaculture principles, returning desert wasteland that I was able to buy pretty inexpensively, you know, a couple $1,000s an acre on the unimproved sections, and turn it into something that you can gather your food from, and that you can, even on the really hot days like we're experiencing right now, you can go lay out in the shade of the trees, right? And the water that you put to the soil stays there because of the layers of mulch that are there. You know, I mean, you know, from a completely almost dead soil, dirt, desert almost. You know, the only thing that's growing is some of the bunch grasses and sagebrush. To bringing a good 8 inches or 10 inches of material or more on top of that as a blanket, it takes a while, but when it starts breaking down and you've provided the environment, the insects are also helping you. So in areas that I've improved, you can dig down and you find earthworms and you find the woodlouse and you find lots of beetles and you find you find all of the life that is in healthy soil through using the trash from society to create it. And when the insects start helping you out, they can do tremendous things. They're going to do so many more things than you even think is possible. The woodlouse, they're eating and absorbing the metals that are in the soil, right? They're removing contaminants that might damage your food supply, and he's able to make you benefit from it. Then the earthworms, they come up and they like the cellulose of the cardboard after it's breaking down, and they consume that and they're taking it down into the soil. And as they burrow into the soil, like little micro Elon Musk tunnel rats, they are pooping, right? They're leaving castings behind. And so then they're breaking up soil so that a root can then follow that source of nutrients down deeper, right? So they're all working together. And when we have at least 13 varieties in a space, we're promoting that natural biodiversity where everything thrives. You know, we have 13 months every year, right? And there's just a lot of connections to what is natural that we are missing in the normal world. So, The other things we can introduce into our gardens is how do we handle weeds? I used to hate having to deal with weeds. But then I sat down for a moment and I let nature teach me. And I said, okay, what's going on with these here? What's really going on here? And the ground wants to be covered. The ground always wants to be covered. Permaculture teaches this: is if we don't plant the seeds that we want to see, Mother Nature is going to throw the things in there that are going to work, right? And they're going to start producing things from nothing. They're the warrior plants. They're the ones that might be sticky and pokey and stinky, or they're the ones that people may not like them. They don't want to walk by them. They don't want to do. But you know what? They're the toughest plants on the planet, and they're there to help you. And if we, instead of uprooting them, we recognize they're here to help us. And if we have to clear them, it's best to just chop them off at ground level. You can chop them off at ground level, still leaving the root networks into the ground and helping the soil to absorb water. And then if you invest into a trash can, right, and you have a trash can, something that holds water, a 55-gallon drum, anything that you can use, and you put the green organic material that you just chopped off at the ground, and you put it in that barrel, right? And then you add water to that barrel, and like right now, about every week seems about the right time frame for how much heat and cool and everything else that we've had. That once a week I go through and I tip these barrels over, and I spread out that ooh juice, right? I mean, we're making a compost tea that is fantastic. And so, and when you take the dog for a walk, or the goat pen needs to be picked up, or you have some chicken manure, or any of these items that you want to add into that too, it is a real benefit, right? And so you take and you created compost tea out of something that was a liability to you. You created an asset. And when we create assets from liabilities, we're going to benefit in every way. And when we can recognize every liability as an asset, we stop hauling everything to the landfill. I think in 20 years or maybe 30 years, we'll be mining these landfills and shaking our heads at what people are throwing away. Just so we can continue mining operations somewhere else to extract the same resources, right? It takes individual responsibility. It takes individuals working together as community to collectively change the experience of life that we're in. So when we are individually leading by example, finding out the best ways around the planet to conduct our life and grow our food and provide the things that we need, and then we educate and inspire others through our actions, we can create change. It's said that those who think that we can't create change in the world should get the hell out of the way of those who are, right? Some of the other things that we can introduce too into our gardens is aquaculture. And so in most of the gardens here, there's a buried like bathtub or a watering trough or a 55-gallon drum, or there's some means of holding fish water. And so we have goldfish swimming in the water, and they're pooping all over it. And you can also integrate black fly larvae generators into the zones where you have fish or chickens. And if you check out the video called Happy Chicken Maggot Maker, that's on the Free Will channel, that kind of shows what's possible of using a liability of a roadkill animal as an asset to bring food for your animals out of the sky, right, without them actually consuming the roadkill. So if you've got the food coming out of the sky for free, feeding fish that are growing up and producing fertilizer for you for free, And then you've got another bucket inside that you can pull the fish water out, or you can use the pump if you've got that available to you. And then water your gardens once a week with the fish water. And then you're also introducing the compost tea from the garbage cans. And you've done a heavy mulch layer. And now you're giving, when you do come into the garden with a garden hose or or buckets of irrigated water, you can fill back up the fish, you can fill back up the compost, and you can kind of just rinse everything down and give everybody a nice big drink. And out here in the desert, that's what it takes. It takes caring for it. It takes changing the conditions so that life can thrive. And so we're building an event center here. It's based on a private ministry, free will ministry. And so if you're in the Pacific Northwest and you'd like to come by and tour it, I'm more than happy to show people around. You got to think that it takes about a 3-hour tour to transcend the storm, the economic storm that we're in.
My 3-hour tour.
It's like my time is probably up.
That was a serious flashback in Gilligan's Island right there. So anyway, yes, we've done about 3 minutes further, but I have something. Hang on, let me turn my air off. I can hear myself. I noticed something over on your wall, and I was curious. You've got this amazingly weird beast living on your land, and I kind of wanted to hear the story of this beast. It looks like he's hiding in a habitat there.
Oh, right. All right. Well, okay. So that right there, although it doesn't look like it, that is a 1986 Ford F-250 farm truck that I bought off of Craigslist for $1,200, and I didn't want it to look like that old beat up farm truck anymore because it was ugly and boring, right? And so we shortened the wheelbase, and I took off the old body, and I started taking metal tubing, and I have a bender and a plasma torch and a grinder and a welder. And so by waving my hands around in my shop, I turned something that was an old farm truck into something that now I call my tractor, because it serves as tractor duty, but it can also drive 70 miles per hour down the highway. And that picture right there that you've got, I took my nephew on a little outing, and we had just some tarps and hammocks and just a cooler with a little bit of food, and so we went up in the hills for a few days and drove all over the mountains and just set up little camps, and it was a lot of fun, and it exposed him to something that he hadn't experienced before. Right? And that's what I'm trying to do here at the Apocalyptic Ostrom is I'm taking a lot of these ideas aren't mine. I mean, I modify other people's ideas and what they've brought to me, and I create the best that I know how to do with what I have. And so I'm taking ideas from all over the world and I'm bringing them into one place, so that way we can see that there's just a whole lot of different ways of doing things. And every time I take that vehicle out, for slowing down and taking pictures and giving me all sorts of high five whatevers, and I'm like, please watch what you're doing. But it's unique, and it's something that they've never seen before. I mean, everybody's seen a Cybertruck now, and half the people that see them, they think they're junk. But everybody that has seen my creation that I was able to build for less than what you would buy a used like a normal truck for. I mean, a truck that can haul a few things and get you to where you want to be. You're going to pay $15,000 or $20,000, and I don't even have that into that. But I've got a lot of hours of my right now moments deciding that this is what I want to happen.
Exactly. Well, as always, brother, it's an honor to have you here. And you're doing great work up in Washington. Thank you so much for holding that stake down for our permaculture guild here at Earth Mother. And let's bring in our next presenter. This guy